The unshakable human. Commander Vex stood on the command deck of the dreadnought Dominion, his massive frame casting long shadows across the polished obsidian floor. At 9 feet tall, the Xalarian warrior was imposing even among his own kind. His iridescent exoskeleton shimmered with each movement, the battle scars etched into the armored plates, telling stories of countless victories. 4 powerful arms rested at his sides, each ending in razor-sharp talons capable of tearing through durasteel. His head, adorned with swept-back spines that formed a natural crown, turned slowly as he surveyed his crew. No one spoke. No one dared. "Status report," Vex commanded, his voice a deep rumble that reverberated through the bridge. The sound alone triggered an instinctive fear response in most species, a biological reaction to the natural fear pheromones that Xalarians had evolved as apex predators. Lieutenant Kraz approached, keeping his head lowered in deference. His secondary arms remained tucked close to his torso, a sign of submission in Xalarian culture. "Commander, our sensors have detected an unidentified vessel at the edge of restricted space. It's small, possibly a scout or exploration craft." Vex's compound eyes narrowed, each facet reflecting the holographic display that materialized before him. The small ship appeared on screen, sleek and elegant despite its diminutive size. Unlike the angular, aggressive design of Xalarian vessels, this craft featured smooth curves and soft blue running lights. "Interesting," Vex said, his mandibles clicking softly. "Species identification." "Unknown, Commander. The design matches nothing in our database." In his 5 centuries of military service, Vex had encountered 43 different spacefaring civilizations. Each had been cataloged, studied, and, when necessary, subjugated. The thought of something new made his blood run hot with anticipation. "Hail them," he ordered. Lieutenant Kraz manipulated the controls. "No response, Commander." "Deployed fighters. Bring the vessel into Docking Bay 3. I want the occupants alive." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, each member acutely aware of the consequences of failure. Commander Vex had not risen to command the flagship of the Xalarian Empire by showing mercy to the incompetent. Vex watched from the command deck as his fighters escorted the small vessel into the enormous docking bay. Once secured, a full squadron of Xalarian warriors surrounded it, plasma weapons charged and aimed at the entry hatch. The foreign vessel's airlock cycled open with a soft hiss. A bipedal figure emerged, small, fragile-looking, standing barely over 5 feet tall. The being wore a fitted blue uniform with silver insignia and carried no visible weapons. Most striking was the soft, exposed skin. No exoskeleton, no natural armor, just vulnerable flesh partially covered by artificial material. "Bring the alien to me," Vex commanded. 20 minutes later, the bridge doors slid open. 2 guards entered, flanking the small alien. Up close, Vex could see more details: 5-fingered hands, round eyes with white sclera surrounding dark brown irises, short black hair framing a face with subtle features. But what truly caught Vex's attention was what he didn't detect. There were no fear pheromones emanating from this creature. Every species they had ever encountered produced them when faced with Xalarians. It was a biological certainty, an autonomic response beyond conscious control. Yet this being showed no such signs. "Leave us," Vex ordered his guards. They hesitated momentarily, an unprecedented reaction that indicated their own concern for his safety, before obeying. Vex circled the alien slowly, his towering frame casting the small being in shadow. He leaned down, bringing his face close, mandibles spread wide to reveal rows of serrated teeth, a display that had made admirals of other species faint. "I am Commander Vex of the Xalarian Empire," he said, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into galactic standard. "Who stands before me?" The alien met his gaze directly. No trembling, no rapid breathing, no widened eyes, nothing. "Captain Maya Chen of the Earth exploration vessel Horizon," she replied. her voice steady and clear. "May I ask why my ship has been detained?" Vex continued circling, his compound eyes studying every detail of this peculiar being. His antennae extended forward, searching for any trace of fear scent. "Nothing. You know what I am?" he asked. "An intelligent being from a world not my own," she answered simply. "You know what I can do to you, to your ship, to your crew." Captain Chen gave a small shrug, a gesture Vex didn't recognize. "I can make educated guesses based on your size, the weaponry your soldiers carry, and the imposing nature of this vessel. But that doesn't answer why you've brought us here instead of simply destroying us." Vex stopped circling. In all his centuries of life, nothing like this had ever happened. The reaction, or rather, the lack of one, sent a disquieting ripple through his body. "You do not tremble," he said, moving closer again. "All others fear me." "Should I?" she asked, looking directly into his compound eyes. Vex's antennae twitched involuntarily. "What are you?" "Just human," Captain Chen replied with the faintest curve of her lips. Nothing more. For the next 3 days, Vex had his science division conduct every non-invasive test they could devise on Captain Chen. They monitored her vital signs during various scenarios designed to induce fear, exposure to predatory animals from across the galaxy, simulations of extreme danger, even staged executions of holographic duplicates of her crew members. Her heart rate barely fluctuated. Her breathing remained steady. Her pupils showed normal dilation patterns. She simply watched each test with calm interest, occasionally asking questions about the scientific methods being employed. On the 4th day, Vex invited Chief Scientist Sorel to his private quarters to discuss the findings. "It defies explanation, Commander," Sorel said, his lower arms gesturing in confusion as he reviewed the data on his pad. "Our fear pheromones trigger responses in every known sentient species. It's how our ancestors dominated our homeworld, and how we've maintained control over our territories. These humans either cannot detect our biochemical signals, or they process them entirely differently." Vex stared at the monitor showing Captain Chen in her quarters. She was performing what appeared to be physical exercises, raising and lowering her body using only her arms. "I want to understand," Vex said quietly. "Prepare interrogation chamber 1. Later that day, Vex sat across from Captain Chen in a small, starkly lit room. The lighting was deliberately harsh, casting sharp shadows across his imposing form. "Where does your kind come from?" he demanded. "Earth. A small blue planet about 30 light-years from here," Chen replied calmly. Her hands rested flat on the table between them. "We're relatively new to interstellar travel. Tell me about your species." "We're adaptable," she said. "We evolved as prey animals originally." Vex's antennae shot upward in surprise. "Prey, not predators." "No. Larger, faster animals hunted us. We were small, weak, and vulnerable," Chen explained. "So we developed our minds instead of physical weapons. We learned to think our way out of danger." This contradicted everything Vex believed about dominant species. In his experience, only apex predators ever achieved space travel. "If you evolved from prey, then you should understand fear better than most," he said, his voice lowering to a threatening rumble. Captain Chen smiled slightly. "Perhaps that's exactly why I don't show it." "Explain." "Fear was constant for early humans. Those who froze in terror died. Those who could think despite their fear survived." She tapped her temple. "We didn't evolve past fear. We evolved to function with it, to use it rather than be used by it." That night, Vex stood alone in his quarters, replaying the conversation in his mind. The idea disturbed him deeply. His species had evolved as perfect predators, using fear as a weapon just as effectively as their natural armor and strength. "Computer, bring up all data on prey species evolution," he ordered. Hours later, he was still reviewing the information when an alarm blared throughout the ship. The command deck reported an unauthorized entry to the weapons bay. Security footage showed 3 Centaurian mercenaries, known for their hatred of Solarians after the conquest of their homeworld, attempting to access the ship's main armament. They must have smuggled themselves aboard during our last port stop, Lieutenant Kraz reported. They're heavily armed and have planted explosive devices throughout the lower decks. Seal all sections. Deploy security teams, Vex ordered. As the crisis unfolded, Vex made an unusual decision. He had Captain Chen brought to the command deck. Your ship is under attack, she observed calmly as she was escorted in. 3 assassins, Vex confirmed. They seek to destroy this vessel and everyone aboard. Including my crew, Chen noted. Yes. She studied the tactical displays, quickly grasping the situation. Your security teams are being drawn to the lower decks, away from the weapons bay. It's a diversion. Vex's compound eyes shifted to the displays. She was right. The pattern was clear now that she pointed it out. The explosives aren't meant to destroy the ship, Chen continued. They're meant to occupy your forces while they access your primary weapon systems. From there, they could target the reactor core. Vex immediately redirected his teams. How did you see this? Humans study patterns. It's how we survived as prey, she explained. When you can't outfight your enemy, you have to outthink them. Within hours, the crisis was resolved. The assassins were captured, their plot foiled. That evening, Vex visited Captain Chen in her quarters, which had been upgraded from a cell to appropriate guest accommodations. You saved my ship today, Vex acknowledged. You could have let the assassins succeed. It might have created an opportunity for you and your crew to escape. That's true, Chen admitted. Then why help me? Why save the life of your captor? Because that's not who I am, she replied simply, looking directly into his compound eyes. I don't want anyone to die if I can prevent it. Not even someone holding me prisoner. Vex's antennae fluttered rapidly, a sign of confusion that he rarely displayed. He paced the small room, his secondary arms twitching. Your actions make no sense by any biological imperative I understand, he finally said. Self-preservation should be your priority. Humans are complex. We value life, even the lives of those who might be our enemies. She paused. Besides, I don't think you're my enemy anymore. Are you, Commander? Vex stood very still. Then, in a gesture he had never made to a non-Solarian, he lowered his upper body slightly, a bow of respect. No, he said quietly. I am not your enemy, Captain Chen. The Alliance. 2 weeks after the assassination attempt, the dynamic aboard the dreadnought Dominion had changed dramatically. Captain Myatt, Chen's crew had been released from their confinement and assigned proper quarters. The humans moved freely through permitted areas of the massive Solarian warship, their presence causing whispers and curious stares wherever they went. The most talked-about development was the growing relationship between Commander Vex and the human captain. They were often seen walking together through the ship's corridors, deep in conversation. The sight of the towering Solarian commander bending down to hear the words of a small, soft-skinned alien was unprecedented. Your engineers are quite impressive, Vex commented as they observed Chen's crew assisting with repairs to a damaged communications array. Lieutenant Rodriguez has implemented improvements to our systems that our own technicians hadn't considered. Humans have always been good at improvising, Chen replied. When you lack natural defenses, you learn to work with what you have. Vex nodded thoughtfully, a different kind of strength. As they continued their tour, a junior officer approached, maintaining proper submission posture. Commander, urgent transmission from High Command. Priority Alpha. Vex immediately led Chen to the secure communications chamber. She was surprised when he did not ask her to wait outside. The holographic image of Grand Admiral Zetix, Supreme Commander of the Solarian Fleet, appeared before them. The ancient Solarian's exoskeleton had faded to a pale blue with age, but his eyes remained sharp and alert. He did not immediately acknowledge Chen's presence. Commander Vex, our long-range scouts have confirmed our worst fears. The Void Collective has breached the Iridian barrier. 3 colony worlds have already gone silent. Vex's posture stiffened. How much time do we have? Days, perhaps weeks at most. You are to represent the Empire at an emergency summit of the Galactic Council. All spacefaring species are being called to discuss a unified response. The Grand Admiral's gaze finally shifted to Chen. I see the rumors are true. You've taken a human as your advisor. Captain Chen has provided valuable insights, Vex replied formally. The humans remain an unknown quantity, Zetik said, his tone skeptical. Nevertheless, your judgment has rarely failed us. The summit convenes in 3 cycles at Nexus Station. Do not fail the Empire. The transmission ended abruptly. Chen looked up at Vex. The Void Collective. A species, if they can even be called that, from beyond the galactic rim, Vex explained, his voice unusually somber. They consume all organic life they encounter, incorporating it into their hive mind. No negotiation is possible. No surrender is accepted. And they're heading this way. Yes, the Iridian barrier was our last line of early warning detection. If they've breached it, Vex's mandibles clicked in concern. The galaxy stands on the brink of extinction. Chen absorbed this information with her characteristic calm. Tell me everything you know about them. Strengths, weaknesses, patterns of attack. Over the next 2 days, Vex briefed Chen on the Void Collective, while the Dominion traveled toward Nexus Station. He shared classified intelligence reports, battle analyses, and the few survivor accounts that existed. They appear to be a silicon-based life form, Vex explained as they reviewed holographic images of the shadowy crystalline entities. They emit a field that disrupts neural activity in organic beings. Most victims simply freeze in place, paralyzed by overwhelming terror as they're consumed. Chen studied the images with intense focus. Fear as a weapon, not unlike what your species does, but on a much larger scale. A comparison I had not considered, Vex admitted. But there is a crucial difference. We use fear to conquer. They use it to feed. When they arrived at Nexus Station, Chen was struck by the scale of the diplomatic gathering. Representatives from 27 spacefaring civilizations had assembled, many of whom were ancestral enemies now forced to consider cooperation. As they entered the Grand Council chamber, Chen noticed how other species instinctively recoiled from Vex's imposing presence. The summit began with reports from the frontier worlds. The news was grim. The Void Collective moved with frightening efficiency, stripping planets of all organic matter within days. Conventional weapons proved ineffective against their crystalline structures. 3 fleets had already been lost in failed defensive actions. As the discussions deteriorated into accusations and panic, Chen observed a pattern. When Solarian representatives spoke, their points, no matter how logical, were met with suspicion and fear. The natural intimidation factor of their species was working against them at the very moment unity was most needed. During a recess, Chen approached Vex. Commander, I have a request. Allow me to address the council. Vex's compound eyes studied her. That would be unprecedented. No non-aligned species has ever addressed a full galactic council. Exactly, Chen replied. I'm neither aligned nor affected by the fear pheromones that are hampering these negotiations. I can speak where you cannot be heard. After a moment's consideration, Vex nodded. I will arrange it. When the council reconvened, murmurs of surprise rippled through the chamber as the small human took the central podium. Chen stood calmly, waiting for silence. Distinguished representatives, she began, her voice clear and steady. I am Captain Maya Chen of Earth, a world many of you have never heard of. My species is new to this galactic community, but perhaps that gives us a perspective worth considering. She continued, outlining a strategy that incorporated elements from various proposals while addressing the concerns that had been raised. As she spoke, Chen noticed how attentively the delegates listened, free from the instinctive fear that colored their interactions with the Solarians. The Void Collective exploits our most primal fear, the fear of being consumed, she concluded. We must recognize this fear, acknowledge it, and then act despite it. Because fear itself is not the enemy. Allowing fear to paralyze us is. When she finished, the chamber remained silent for several moments. Then, gradually, representatives began to signal their agreement. Within hours, a coordinated defense strategy was approved, one that would never have gained consensus under Xalarian leadership alone. As they left the council chamber, Vex looked down at Chen with new respect. You've accomplished in one day what our diplomats have failed to achieve in centuries. Sometimes an outside perspective helps, she replied. And sometimes not being feared makes it easier to be heard. Their conversation was interrupted by a deafening explosion. The station shuddered violently, throwing them against a wall. Emergency klaxons blared as the lights flickered. Station command, report. Vex demanded into his communicator. Multiple breaches in sectors 7 through 12, came the panicked response. It's the Void Collective. They've somehow reached the station. Our defenses air. The transmission cut off abruptly. Vex turned to Chen. We need to evacuate. My shuttle is in docking bay 3. What about the other delegates? Chen asked. Every species for themselves. That's the protocol during a station breach. Chen shook her head firmly. Not this time. If we're going to defeat the collective, we need to start by saving each other. Before Vex could argue, Chen was already moving toward the nearest emergency communication panel. She quickly issued a station-wide broadcast in Galactic Standard. This is Captain Chen. All delegates proceed to Xalarian Docking Bay 3 for immediate evacuation. This is not a drill. I repeat, all delegates to Docking Bay 3. Vex stared at her in disbelief. My shuttle can't possibly accommodate all of them. Then we'll make multiple trips, Chen replied, her expression resolute. Or we'll find another solution. But we're not leaving anyone behind. As they made their way through the increasingly chaotic corridors, they encountered the first wave of the Void Collective. Floating crystalline entities that pulsed with eerie inner light. The air around them seemed to vibrate with malevolent energy. Several station security officers lay crumpled on the floor, their weapons unfired. They weren't dead. Chen could see their chests moving, but they were completely paralyzed, their eyes wide with terror. The fear field, Vex explained grimly, drawing his plasma rifle. Most species can't function once exposed. Chen felt a pressure in her mind, a creeping dread that threatened to overwhelm her thoughts, but she pushed through it. Years of training had taught her to acknowledge fear without surrendering to it. We can't go around them, she said, assessing the situation. We have to go through. To her surprise, Vex seemed to be struggling. His massive frame trembled slightly, his movements becoming hesitant. Commander, she said firmly, gripping his lower arm. Focus on me. Remember what we discussed. Fear is a tool, not a master. Vex's compound eyes fixed on her, and gradually his posture straightened. I've never felt this before. First time for everything, Chen replied with a grim smile. She picked up a fallen officer's weapon. Ready? Together, they charged through the crystalline entities. The pressure in Chen's mind intensified, threatening to crack her composure, but she maintained focus, picking her shots carefully. Vex fought beside her, his natural strength making each hit devastating. They reached the docking bay to find it in chaos. Delegates from across the galaxy were streaming in, many showing signs of the fear effect. Several Xalarian officers who had accompanied Vex were trying to maintain order. My shuttle can accommodate 20 at most, Vex told Chen. There are over 100 delegates. Chen scanned the bay quickly. There, she pointed to a large transport vessel. That's a Centaurian diplomatic carrier. It's designed for their entire delegation. The Centaurians would never allow others to board their vessel, Vex objected. They will if the alternative is death, Chen replied, already moving toward the Centaurian ambassador, who was huddled with his security detail. What followed was a masterclass in crisis negotiation. Chen convinced the Centaurians to allow others aboard their vessel, persuaded two other species to share their emergency supplies, and organized the evacuation while Vex and his officers established a defensive perimeter against the advancing collective. As the last group of delegates boarded the Centaurian vessel, Chen turned to Vex. "We need to buy them time to launch." Vex understood immediately. The station's power core. If we overload it, the explosion might disrupt the collective's advance. "Let's go," Chen said, checking her weapon. They fought their way to the station's engineering section, encountering more of the crystalline entities. With each encounter, Chen noticed that Vex seemed to be building resistance to the fear effect. By the time they reached the power core, he was fighting with his usual efficiency. "You've adapted," she observed as they worked to modify the core's containment field. "Learning from your example," Vex replied, his mandibles clicking in what Chen now recognized as a Xalarian expression of respect. Humans aren't the only ones who can evolve. With the power core set to overload, they raced back to the docking bay. Vex's shuttle was the last vessel remaining. As they prepared to board, a wave of void entities flooded into the bay. "Go," Chen shouted, pushing Vex toward the shuttle. "I'll hold them off." Instead, Vex lifted her with one arm and placed her inside the shuttle, then turned to face the oncoming threat. "Prepare for launch," he ordered. Chen watched in amazement as Vex, the feared Solarian commander who had conquered half the galaxy, stood alone against the advancing collective. His natural fear of the entities was evident in his trembling limbs, but he fought through it, his plasma rifle cutting down the crystalline forms one after another. When the path was clear, he leaped into the shuttle. "Now," he commanded, and the vessel shot out of the docking bay just as the first tremors of the station's overload began. The explosion behind them was blinding. The shuttle sensors went dark temporarily as the shockwave propelled them forward. When systems came back online, they saw the void entities that had been pursuing them were gone, destroyed or dispersed by the blast. As they rendezvoused with the evacuation fleet, reports came in from across the sector. The Void Collective's advance had been temporarily halted by the station's destruction. It wasn't a victory, but it was the first successful defensive action against them. In the shuttle's small cabin, Chen and Vex sat side by side, watching the stars through the viewport. "You know," Chen said thoughtfully, "on Earth, we have an old saying. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Vex considered this a paradox. "Not really," Chen replied. "It means that fear is often more dangerous than what we're afraid of. The Void Collective's greatest weapon isn't their physical form. It's the paralysis of terror they create. And that is why they fear you," Vex said. "A species that can function despite fear is their greatest threat." "Not just humans," Chen corrected. "You fought through it too. You adapted." Vex's antennae twitched in acknowledgement. "Perhaps that is the alliance we need. Your kind teaching mine to master fear, and my kind providing the strength to fight." Chen smiled. "I think that's just the beginning." As their shuttle approached the Dominion, they received a transmission from Grand Admiral Zetix. The aged Solarian looked at them both with newfound respect. "Commander Vex, Captain Chen, the Council delegates have unanimously voted to establish a joint defense command. They have requested that you both lead it." Vex looked at Chen, his compound eyes reflecting the stars around them. "Even the strongest warriors tremble before the unknown," he said quietly. "But perhaps with humans at our side, we can learn to face it nonetheless." Chen nodded, her expression determined. "Together, then." "Together," Vex agreed. And so began the greatest alliance the galaxy had ever known, born not of conquest or submission, but of mutual respect and a shared understanding that true strength lies not in causing fear, but in overcoming it.